This episode may contain content that could be distressing or objectionable to certain listeners. Please refer to the episode show notes for details. Discretion is advised. Hello! Welcome to Your Movie, My Movie with Dan and Steve.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Steve. Also with us today is a special co-host, filmmaker Carlos.
Здравствуйте, други. That was really bad. This is why I don't speak Russian.
Take two.
Здравствуйте, други. Меня зовут Карлос, я режиссер и антропологист.
Okay. This is a podcast where one of us picks a movie to watch and we discuss it together. In this episode, we're talking about one of Carlos's picks, the 1975 movie Mirror, starring Margarita Terikova, Ignat Daniltsev, Alla Demidova, Anatoly Solzhenitsyn, Larissa Tarkovsky, and Maria Vishnakova. Was written by Alexander Misharin and Andrei Tarkovsky, and was directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. We will be talking about spoilers, so if you want to watch the movie first, now's the time to do so. But before we talk about the movie, Dan, who would you recommend this movie to?
I would recommend this movie to film buffs who need to empathize with their parents without actually talking to them.
Okay, Carlos, who would you recommend this movie to?
Artists. It's a film made by someone who is an artist to an almost pretentious level. And
almost a pretentious level, you said.
I mean, because we'll talk about it later, but he's very self-aware of how obscure not, but he's aware of how methodological he is in terms of using art as a way to make something personal be felt global.
Okay.
So I would recommend it for artists who are essentially looking to find their own voice.
Okay, wonderful.
Steve, who would you recommend this movie for?
I would recommend this movie to fans of David Lynch when they've watched all of David Lynch. Or when they want to watch something that isn't so David Lynch. Or for people who want to see what Big Gold Brick probably either tried to be or tried to parody and failed at both.
Wow.
I have no idea who that is.
You don't want to know.
I sent you a picture of Big Gold Brick, Carlos. It's the picture. Anyways, it's a terrible movie. It's just the worst. It's an indie movie with Oscar Isaac in it for like 5 minutes because of a personal favor.
Oh my god!
But it also has Andy Garcia for the whole movie.
The really shitty poster that you sent me?
Yes.
Okay.
We watched it for the podcast.
What the fuck?
And it's awful, and Steven hated it so much that he made it his new...
I thought that was a fake movie. That looked like a fake poster.
It's real.
No,
that looked like one of those awful that Twitter account that's like awful fan posters, and it has a picture of like Ryan Gosling, and the film is like Obama. that's what that poster looks like.
Yeah,
I'll have to check that out.
What, that Twitter account?
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Wonderful. So that's who I would recommend this to. And okay, so to get the conversation, to get it started, first, Carlos, I want to hear why you chose this movie to be your pick for us to watch and discuss.
Because you guys wouldn't let me pick a movie that was greater than 3 hours, and That's one of 2 Tarkovsky films.
Well,
that's
how
2
long
hours.
was the movie you wanted to show us?
3 hours, 20 minutes.
But there's one that's 7 hours that you also wanted to show us.
That's a different
too.
one, but that's a different filmmaker as well.
Okay,
so the one that I really wanted to watch was Andrei Rublev, which is another Tarkovsky film dealing with art as well. It's essentially a biopic set in the medieval ages, essentially what were the dark ages of Russia, when they were just constantly getting barraged by the Mongol horde. And essentially the protagonist is a real life person known as Andrei Rublev, who was a iconographer that worked in various monasteries throughout I think it's 14th century Russia. Beautiful film, a devastating film as well. A devastatingly difficult film as well. If you think this was difficult, yeah, this film is 3 hours and 20 minutes long. It's in black and white, and it deals with the knowing of God, the not knowing of God. Is it even possible to know God?
Sounds a lot like Pi. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't seen Pi. No, that's the guy Aronofsky, right?
Yeah, Darren Aronofsky. Yeah.
No, I haven't seen that one, but
yeah, a little different though, I'm sure.
No, I mean that one's what, like 120, an hour 20.
Yeah. I think it was one of his first feature-length films. So yeah.
But Mirror, anyways, is
But why'd you pick Mirror? Mirror?
So Mirror is a personal introspective look into Tarkovsky's life that has been reviewed by critics and filmmakers as essentially one of the most technically masterful ways of exploring memory and dreams. Tarkovsky was a big proponent of the theory that film is a mosaic made out of time, and you see this very heavily in that film, in Mirror, and all of his filmography as well, where he physically manipulates time so that you almost get exhausted watching his films. But it's
so that's what that was.
Yeah, no, it's totally to a purpose. It's
well, I wasn't that exhausted by this movie, but when you throw that pitch, I gotta swing at it.
No, yeah, I mean, it's always best to go into a movie blind, I think, and then afterwards to kind of like sit and meditate with it a little bit. But yeah, the reason why this is one of his more difficult films is because of that, because it's so personal and it's really not entirely knowable exactly what everything means because of how personal of a film it is.
Yeah.
Thank God, because I felt so stupid watching this movie. But I mean, I'm a person who, I don't think of myself as like extremely knowledgeable in any sense, but I enjoy films by my emotions relating to them. So I was still able to enjoy this movie. Yeah. So I was glad about that, but I did feel completely stupid.
Why? What was it that made you feel stupid?
Well, because I don't know anything about really history. And I'm just ignorant in general, pretty much. So like a lot of this movie seems to deal with Russia and the Soviet Union at the time, and World War II history, and just kind of the history of, I'm assuming, the time period around his parents' lifetime, and maybe his early lifetime. And I'm just not super familiar with, any of the world leaders at the time. Like, I know very few people. I know bits and pieces, but yeah, I have a lot to learn, and it's also not really typically the way I approach film in general. But yeah.
Oh, I think you're wrong. I think I see a lot of how you are as a filmmaker in this movie, especially of all the movies we've seen. Actually, you as a filmmaker, I've seen a lot in this one.
I mean, I love the movie and I relate to it in a lot of ways, but I just mean like the parts that I didn't feel able to understand were the like historical parts. I guess.
Yeah.
Technically, you relate to it, and in terms of a technical level.
Well, even
technically
artistic
and emotionally, yeah.
Because we were talking a few weeks ago, and we were talking about what annoys us that we see from other filmmakers. And for Dan, it was Dan gets annoyed when other directors they don't think about all of their shots ahead of time, and all they do is they set the camera up and they say, "Oh, it looks great," and then so they run with it, and Dan hates that.
Yeah, no, there's a point to be made there. I remember.
How dare you choose a pretty good shot?
Well, okay, but
you have to think about it. You have to think about the emotion involved.
I'm gonna back him up on this because there's a point to be made about being very methodological about your shots, and if you don't have a natural instinct for it, then you're just not gonna really.
It depends on your style. It depends on your ambition.
Let me give you a specific example, and then I'll cut off real quick so you can jump in, Dan. But I remember when I was watching Fences, the Denzel Washington film.
Okay.
I mean, everybody knows how great of an actor Denzel is. As a filmmaker, he's kind of boring. And I remember he was talking before he made his first film. I forget which one it is. It might have been The Great Debaters, was it?
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure. But before he made his first film, he asked Antoine Fuqua for advice as to how to set up a camera, and Antoine Fuqua basically just stated, just point and shoot.
Yeah.
And I think that's something. That feels wrong, and that sounds like so gatekeeping or whatever, but you do have to be kind of methodological about how you're setting up a camera and how the film is going to look. Otherwise, it's just going to look very bland. And I feel like Fences is one of those films that, it was a great story and it had great acting, but visually, it's just a very boring film.
The thing is,
hold on, just real quick, you hire a great DP who will think of that for you, and then you work with them.
Who DP'd Fences?
Huh?
Do we know who DP'd Fences?
I have no idea.
Thank you. But anyways, if you want, I can look it up and you can say what you wanted to say, Dan.
Well, okay. So like everything has its place, right? Because there is that advice of just point it and shoot it, which is fine. But at the same time, you have to care about it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And you can't just be like, all right, well, this stuff's happening over there, so we'll point the stuff over there. I mean, yes, you want to capture the stuff, but if you want to emote through your movies, you need to emote through your camera. You need to make sure that your camera expresses feelings. Or if it's not that, then you need to make sure it has a purpose behind what you're doing. So if it's just like, okay, this is a big budget movie where we just get the stuff, and the stuff is what's important. The camera movement is not as important as the stuff we're capturing. That's fine. But if it's not like that, which you like people will just make everything that way, And I was talking, when we were talking about this, I was talking about filmmakers that we know who are student filmmakers.
Well, we're not going to throw them under the bus,
right? But
cut this out. No names, but go ahead.
No, but like student filmmakers, that's just what happens. You learn. Yeah. And you learn that you can actually have fun with the camera and do things that are interesting to you. You don't have to just get the stuff.
Yeah. Well, what irks me in regards to that is how student filmmakers, they'll focus more on their script and making sure that everything that they wrote down in their script goes into the movie, but they'll forego visual storytelling. Because there was this one student film, and they had this great visual storytelling part. And they fucking cut it because they thought it messed up the pace. And I'm like, why? And it's because, well, I have this other part where my actors say the lines. And it's like, that's not better.
Yeah.
Movie is a visual medium. So whenever you can default to visual storytelling in lieu of dialogue, that's what you should do. And I think that's what irks me about, student filmmakers.
It was Robert Altman. It's one of my favorite quotes in terms of like film knowledge. Robert Altman, who said, the visual stimulation is the reason for film. Otherwise, we should just turn out the lights and call it radio.
Yeah.
Because that's entirely true.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever you can do visual storytelling, you should, even at the cost of, the dialogue you wrote. You have to... you can't have your ego keep you from cutting that. So yeah, which is another problem. I don't think it's just student films. I think it's also just a lot of films nowadays in general. What I usually try to do is a nice test is to essentially go deaf for a minute or two
and if you're still able to understand what is going on in the film with like you covering your ears like this, then it achieves what is going on. Then it achieves the goal of getting something that's visually stimulating. But if you can close your eyes and you can still get the story, it's not really a film. It's a script with visual images, which is essentially what a film is. It's a radio play. Thank you.
The thing though too is it's also just a thing that storytellers in general have to learn. Because with writing, you have to do the same thing. You have to show through imagery and dialogue, and you can't just explain everything. I mean, it's a concept that works everywhere, but I mean, in film especially, you need to use the visual medium that you're using.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's not to say you can't have dialogue-heavy films.
No.
Some of the best films are dialogue-heavy, but those films that are dialogue-heavy, I'm thinking of, the earliest example I can think of is 12 Angry Men, which is a film entirely about dialogue.
Well, it was based on a stage play. I mean,
but the way that, is it Sidney Lumet who directed that?
I think so.
I think so.
Double check for me, please. But anyways, the way that film was blocked in stage, you can easily watch that film with the sound off and still get the visual tension that's going on between all the jurors. Yeah, and that's the whole point of film.
So yeah.
So you want to get the conversation started?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
are we gonna use the note cards?
Yeah. Go ahead and grab your note cards.
Okay.
So before we recorded, I had everybody write on a note card what they think this movie is about. So Dan, you go ahead first.
Okay. I mean, forgive the wording if it's awkward. A look into the life of the filmmaker himself and his mind and childhood. It's about Andrei Tarkovsky's parents, mainly his mom.
Okay, and Carlos?
Yeah, sure. It's a personal autodidactic meditation of Tarkovsky's childhood memories and family history set within the context of 20th century Russo-Soviet history.
Okay, and I said it's a cinematic Soviet version of We Didn't Start the Fire.
Just taking the piss.
What's We Didn't Start the Fire? Is that a movie?
That's the Billy Joel song.
Oh, okay.
We didn't start the fire. It's been turned into... Yeah.
This dude saw one fire in the film and he's like, oh, Billy Joel!
Well, there's a lot of fire in this movie, though.
That's actually a very common motif for Tarkovsky. Not just fire, but rain with fire.
Okay, yeah, a lot of rain, too.
Which is... You would think of that in terms of something biblical, right? The thing about Tarkovsky is he doesn't really operate within symbols, or as he's not a very symbolic filmmaker. Thank you. Yeah. A lot of it has to do more with how those occurrences or how those situations would feel within the context of the person that's experiencing it. It's something that I forget the scholar that it was Zizek, is Slavoj Zizek, if you guys know who that is.
No idea.
He
I only went to community college, man.
he's the guy who like makes the memes. He's like,
he talks like this, and he's very slurry. He's like
ideology is like this, like the garbage man, and they leave. I sent you the thing where he's like, they insert him into the movie They Live. Anyway,
he's a pop communist, and he's also post-Marxist, actually, philosopher. Okay. And he did an analysis of various films called The Pervert's Guide to Cinema. Okay. And he talks about Stalker, actually, which is, I know you mentioned, is the only other Tarkovsky film you've seen, about how the objective of Tarkovsky is not to render something with meaning, but rather to obscure its meaning. And it's in direct opposition to the 19th century principles that were espoused by people like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Descartes, when they were trying to create Enlightenment thinking. Tarkovsky is very much like, how can we know something in its full? And so essentially what those pieces are, the fire burning, the woman holding the twig with the hand in front of it and the twig is on fire, even one of the last shots of the film where Alexei is throwing up the baby bird up into the air, it's not supposed to be something that's entirely symbolic. It's supposed to bring about the question. It's supposed to create discussion and dissonance as to what exactly this means. Does it actually mean anything? In many ways, I feel it was funny that you mentioned David Lynch, because I don't think you can find a more diametrically opposed, at least technically, filmmaker to David Lynch than Tarkovsky.
Really?
But I can see where that obscurantism remains. I think they just have different means of going about it.
Okay. How do you mean they're diametrically opposed? What do you mean by that?
I find a lot of irony in what Lynch does.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and Tarkovsky's not an ironic
he's just genuine.
He's genuine, but he's also just... How do I explain it? It doesn't... I don't think there's supposed to be an ironic sense to any of his films.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is, even comedy, which is funny because you laughed at one point when...
Yeah. At a few points.
At a few points. I didn't notice any of the other ones, but Tarkovsky, in a sense, is trying to operate. I think he's very obsessed with that idea of how can we know anything, whereas David Lynch is like, we can't know anything. Fuck it, it doesn't matter. That's essentially what I think. Well,
I don't think David Lynch is really involved with we can't know anything. I think it's more like you said, irony, where David Lynch is very involved with the American dream, and then the corruption of the American dream. So, maybe there's kind of a similarity between that with David Lynch and in this movie with Tarkovsky, because, this movie is very, it shows a lot of political things. It talks a lot about politics, especially in regards with Russia and the rest of the world. And then, because, we see stock footage of, I think, Russian soldiers versus during World War II, during the Spanish Civil War, and then the atomic bomb testing. But it's not in that geopolitical level. It's more like a personal level.
Yeah, it's like memories, like you were saying earlier, Carlos. It's like memories of fragments of maybe his parents or just people's memories almost. But it's made what I. Sorry to jump in, Steve. I'll let you finish. But what I found really interesting about it was that they added in dubbing and Foley to the footage, and I didn't realize it until I'd seen 2 or 3 flashbacks of these real footage, and I was like, holy shit, they added that in. But it felt so amazingly real and concurrent with the footage. It was like it's like what Andrew Jackson tried to do with making everything in color again and making it 60 frames per second.
You say Andrew Jackson, I think of the president.
Sorry, what is his name?
Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson. Thank you, Peter Jackson.
With they shall not grow old.
Yeah. That's what it reminded me of. Sorry, Andrew Jackson. Fuck.
Well, I thought you were talking about Ted Turner from CNN when he bought the rights to the MGM movies and decided to colorize everything and put them on TV.
Oh God.
When you're talking about colorizing.
No, I was talking about Peter Jackson. Thank you. Sorry. But bring life to footage that we feel disconnected from, maybe.
Well, I mean, that's another thing with this movie, because, it was made in the 1970s, but it's obviously been digitally remastered. And we watch it streaming.
Thank you, Criterion.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is it looks so clean, but, it doesn't have that grain anymore, which I kind of like.
It still has grain?
Not as much, though, I don't think.
I don't think they would take out the grain.
But I like my old movies kind of dirty in that way.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, you like your movies dirty. Yeah.
Well, you haven't listened to the heavy metal. Have you seen heavy metal?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well.
I was going to say, actually, that was only something that happened very recently. I think the first version that I saw of Mirror was the one that was uploaded onto the Mosfilm YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. They have like pretty much all their films on there. And it was before the Criterion restoration occurred. So I think I saw the cut that you would have wanted to see.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is it has half the subtitles.
But this isn't a movie that you really gotta.
Actually, I would disagree. This is one of the films that the dialogue is the most important because you have the narration of the person that's playing Alexei. But then you also, one of the more interesting facts about this film is that Tarkovsky's father was actually a renowned poet in the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And Tarkovsky includes some of his father's poetry as recited by his father in this film. And I think that really helps to draw in the personal context of the film as a whole, and which is why the subtitles for people who don't naturally speak Russian are so necessary.
But if you don't have the subtitles, I feel that you could still get the feelings from this movie for sure.
And that goes back to what we said about the visual stimulation.
Yeah. And that also goes back to the comparison to David Lynch, because David Lynch, he's such a visual storyteller as well, and he also knows how to do emotionally evocative shots. Like are in this movie. The thing with David Lynch, though, is that he will do it to unnerve you, whereas Tarkovsky, he does it for a different reasons.
He does it almost to give you the feeling of something greater than to like you were saying earlier.
He's a very spiritual filmmaker. He's a very, very spiritual filmmaker.
Yeah.
Stalker was on my list to show you, Stephen, eventually. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad we got another Tarkovsky to watch. Yeah,
when I was writing my notes for this movie, it really made me think of that quote from Parks and Rec, where Aziz Ansari, he commissioned somebody to make art for him, and it's just an abstract painting, and he's like, these shapes, I've been staring at them for 3 hours. There's a circle here, and this triangle red here, and there's this green thing here. It's beautiful. And this movie is a lot like that. Because, if you ask me what the plot of this movie is, I couldn't tell you. I just could not tell you.
It feels like a therapy session almost.
Yeah.
Upon rewatching this, I actually compared it a lot to Bardo. I don't know if you guys have seen Bardo yet.
No.
Another, this is actually, Alejandro González Iñárritu was actually my introduction to Tarkovsky. Tarkovsky's influence on Iñárritu is unpoppable. There's an essay by Kokonada. I don't know if you guys know who Kokonada is.
No.
It's a once video essayist, now turned filmmaker, who did a video essay literally comparing shots from Iñárritu to Tarkovsky, and you can see the influence. Some of them Iñárritu ripped straight out of Tarkovsky's work, specifically this film. And now with Bardo having come out last year, you see exactly how much Iñárritu ties in Tarkovsky's personal style to the greater movement, the greater Latin American movement of what is that called? Magical realism.
Okay.
Magical realism, which Gabriel Garcia Marquez operates within in literature, and I think Iñárritu is the greatest example of that occurring in filmmaking.
Okay.
So go and watch Bardo now, and you tell me what you guys feel about that. And it's a much more accessible film.
I'll let you pick that. I'll let you pick that the next time you're on the show. How about that?
It's more than 2 hours though.
How long is it?
2 hours 30.
That should be fine. Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah. This movie and movies like it, they're not really my cup of tea, but, I'm not going to shit on this movie. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying, it's not usually the kind of thing I enjoy. It's not the thing I would make. But I understand that it really inspires other filmmakers and filmmakers to other styles, which, I have no problem with. I think it's great. I think I think all filmmakers should watch movies like these, you know, like I said, just to learn how to do that fully visual or mostly visual storytelling that happens in this movie. Because there's a ton of like really great and very technically complex and complicated shots that are, you know, that filmmakers should just watch, you know, if nothing else, just to see those.
Some of those shots are even like impressive today. The film is called Mirror for a very obvious reason. We see a shit ton of mirrors in that film.
Yeah.
And then it makes you wonder how the fuck in the 1970s, when there was no digital removal of cameras or anything, did they get those shots of those mirrors?
Yeah. There's a lot of wonders in this movie, but you know, it'll start like in one way, and then and like somebody will like show up on another side of something, you know?
Yeah. I wrote that down as in, where did I write it down? Okay, he has a way of making people appear in the frame that completely disorients you. And it makes me think of if it's to make it feel like more of a memory, in that it's not linear, it's not spatial in the same way that, you know, physical space is. Memories are and dreams are the you know, but he does that so just brilliantly. Like whenever the shot you're talking about, I think is whenever, oh man, I don't remember.
I think it was I think it might have had to do with the shower, but I'm not sure.
The mother, well, I was talking about the mother, Natalia.
They're two different characters.
Oh, she apparently, that one actress plays several roles.
She plays Alexi's mother, and she also plays Alexi's ex-wife.
Yeah,
which adds a whole nother layer to that confusion.
Yeah.
You remember in the film, he's like, for some reason, when I think of my mother, I think of her with your face. So then we know then to read that actress when she's in the dacha in the Russian countryside. That's not Natasha, that's Maria, which is Alexi's mother.
Which also adds to you saying that this is a, you know, therapy session.
It's funny because a whole bunch of films last year came out that are very personal, but also I'm thinking of Spielberg's Fablemans.
Oh yeah,
where it's just like, film is just therapy, man. All these filmmakers are sad little boys just looking for mommy's attention,
or bad fathers. In the winter, in the snow.
That's the theme I have.
Or both.
Yeah. I have a theme of picking movies that are about terrible dads in the snow.
Yeah.
Nice. So then you should look at The Revenant as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Have you not seen it?
I haven't seen The Revenant.
Oh, well, that's another Iñárritu film where he stole directly from...
That's a little mainstream, but...
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah,
it's not really my style. It's too mainstream, you know?
Yeah. You guys are into underground hipster stuff. The stuff that doesn't even have pictures on Wikipedia.
Well, that's him. I'm into mainstream stuff that, you know, your generation has totally forgotten about. So.
Totally forgotten or were never taught.
You know, 6 of 1 have to end the other. You know, so.
Oh, one thing. Okay, not to like make fun of this movie, but
let me know when we can make fun of this movie because I have a few things.
What you were saying about sort of gathering symbols that don't necessarily, they might not have a meaning, but they're supposed to make you think or feel, just by them being in the film. It's like, it reminds me of a quote I saw, you know, on Instagram like 5 years ago or whatever. But I was like, the job of the filmmaker is to insert symbols that make you feel things or, you know, evoke thought or emotion. And then I just thought of the shot in The Village, M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, where it's just the rocking chair, just like on like the porch and like the fog, and it's like, why is that there? Why is that there?
I haven't seen it, I'm sorry.
You haven't seen The Village? Oh, okay.
No, actually, I don't think the only Shyamalan film I've seen is the one with McAvoy.
Oh, Split?
It's the only one I've seen from him.
Okay, because that's it's frustrating because weirdly enough, there's like I saw a lot of Shyamalan in this movie, and like I know people hate Shyamalan, it's whatever, I get it. But there's a shot specifically where oh gosh, what is his name? Ignat, I believe. Ignat.
The child.
Yes. His mom leaves him alone in this house or apartment or whatever, with books, and there's like a little room off to the side with the table. And she leaves him alone, and he's like looking around, poking through stuff. She said, "Don't touch anything," and he starts like touching all the books and stuff. But then the camera pans, that does that thing where there was no one there previously, but now the table is set, and there's a woman having tea. And she asks him, she asks him to get out a notebook and read a selection from it. And so he does, and I forget if he puts the book back or whatever, but the camera pans away, and it comes back, and the table is completely empty now, except for the mist or the steam or the condensation.
The steam on the table from the warm cup of tea or coffee.
Yes, which was like, so freaking amazing. But it reminds me exactly of a shot from The Sixth Sense. Where where the kid is seeing ghosts, but no one else sees ghosts. And there's like a woman at the table in his mom's kitchen, and then he looks back, and it's only the condensation from that woman's palms. It's just very interesting. Like it's funny, but I think it's really weird how everything connects. I probably shouldn't have brought it up.
No, it's fine. But also during that scene, as they show, the condensation from the coffee cup, that's when they play the 2001: A Space Odyssey.
And that's what you wanted to make fun of. That's what he wanted to make fun of.
That's not it, though. That's not it. But
he has other stuff he wants to make fun of.
We'll go on.
I loved that though. Like I thought that was so powerful. Like,
that was a great shot. Yeah,
it just made me feel
you don't
so
see
much.
that every day.
No. Holy shit! Like it's so poetic because it's about the tiny little things in life, and it's not like these big huge moments. It's just like when you're a child and you see ghosts, but it might not be a ghost, or when you're a child and you see things you can't explain.
Well, it goes with that whole memory and dream and the difference between the two that's going on in the movie.
And another thing to add further context into that scene, we're talking about the whole dreamlike feel of that specific scene. One thing that's interesting to note is that the passage that Ignat is reading from was one written by, I think it was Pushkin, who is a Russian poet, 19th century, not poet, excuse me. Was it poet, writer? I'm going to say writer. Who is talking about the difference between Russia and Europe. A lot of Russian artists feel like there is definitely division between Russia and Europe, and we're seeing that today in the Ukrainian war. How because they blame it, Pushkin blames it on the division, on the East-West schism in the church. And how that forced Russia and the Eastern Bloc to develop separately from Europe, and so they didn't receive the Enlightenment. They didn't receive the same kind of theses that were provided to Western Europe in that context, which I think further cements that whole idea of Tarkovsky totally just separating himself from Western Europe thematically and developing this idea of in a sense as where it's where we discuss about the European Enlightenment, we can also talk about the Russian obscurantism.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that's what further adds context to that whole idea that's going on in that scene.
Well, in the Soviet Union, that obscurantism, that probably added to that, where you have the political authoritarianism and when Stalin doing the purge of his officer corps, and then they edit those people out of those pictures. So yeah,
maybe that shot is actually a throwback now. But it's funny you mentioned now the politics. I'm not going to get into politics or anything like that, but Tarkovsky was actually not the biggest fan of the Soviet regime. Andrei Rublev, the film I was mentioning a bit ago, was actually banned within the Soviet Union for a good 15 years, I think. It got its premiere in Moscow, and that same night it got banned. And so the only place that got its full release was within the West. And we see this again occurring throughout Tarkovsky's filmography, where he's trying to respond to the West or he's coming up with his own ideas in the Russian sense. But in the end, he is forced into exile, and his last two films, Nostalgia and The Sacrifice, were made in Western Europe. Nostalgia was made in Italy, and The Sacrifice was made in Sweden with actually Sven Nykvist. I don't know if you guys know Sven Nykvist was Ingmar Bergman's longtime cinematographer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And those are two films as well that very much deal with very personal themes to Tarkovsky. Nostalgia deals with a man living outside of Russia who is Russian, and the Sacrifice deals with a man who, in order to deter World War III from happening, makes a pact with a witch.
Okay.
And you can see again these semblances of Tarkovsky thinking about, you know, death and the destruction of the world because of this dichotomy between or separating Russia from the rest of the world, that he even makes his last film about the very destruction and ultimate, actually the film ends up on a morally gray note, but the salvation of the world. It's the way to read Tarkovsky is not necessarily in independent films,
right,
but I think especially as you get later on into his career, to look at it as a body of work, each work responding to the last one.
It seems like what it is he feels that he himself is very Russian, but the government of Russia wouldn't allow him, you know, to say what he thought, and so then he had to go outside of Russia, even though he wanted the divide. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily that he wanted the divide, but there's actually a passage that's mentioned in Mirror as well. I forget exactly which part, but where he says that he doesn't want to go out to the West because he is very this isn't exactly in the film, but this is me trying to interpret the analysis of it.
Okay, is it the part where he says that Russia still has a special, even though I wrote down the division of churches divided Russia from Europe, but Russia had its own special destiny.
Right, exactly. And so what essentially he's trying to do is forge his own path with the knowledge of what the world is doing as well, but knowing that ultimately he is bound to Russia, because of that is where his fathers are, that is where his brothers are, that is where his history is. He wouldn't select any other history other than his own. And so ultimately he's trapped. He's a filmmaker working in Italy and Sweden in his twilight years, but with a distinctive Russian ethic.
It's so interwoven into his identity and the way he thinks of himself and the way he interprets the world. And
in the end, his films become, especially his last two films, become really schizophrenic. And that whole divide, it's like, oh, I'm living abroad, but my heart still lies with Russia, so much so that he actually ended up being buried in Paris. He was never returned back to Russia.
The films too, I've only seen Stalker and this, but they have this despair and just like this yearning that is never fulfilled, and this just anguish. I don't know if that's him or if that's Russian, Russian, disposition.
Oh, it's a Russian disposition for sure.
It's a Russian disposition, but that's the thing. It's also very Tarkovsky. Tarkovsky was somebody who lamented a lot, and it's difficult to think of him as a very joyful person because of how depressing his films can be. But the fact remains that in spite of all of that, he, I think, is somebody who still had hope for something better. Because and that ties and that feels very Nietzschean in terms of, I know everything sucks, but I have to believe that it's going to get better. I have to believe that everything will be better in the future. Otherwise, what the fuck am I doing this for?
Yeah, I mean, look at the ending. It's the cabin is destroyed. Right. This is my reading, at least. The cabin is destroyed, and like things have gone to disrepair, things have burned down, things have deteriorated, but humanity is still alive. You still have grandmothers walking through fields with their grandchildren, and the sun still sets and looks beautiful, and the trees.
Yeah, but right before that, there's that sequence where we see the woman, laying on top of the doctor. They just fucked in the woods, and he's like, "Do you want a boy or do you want a girl?" So that's that. There's just springtime just as much as there's a winter.
Oh my gosh, that was probably my favorite shot of the movie. It was just her expression. Yeah. It felt like she was completely trapped. Mm-hmm. And you could just see so much. You could see her whole life on her face in that shot. Mm-hmm. Because the despair of where she is and what she's just potentially done, and you can see her looking at the cabin and like imagining her future, and she's trapped, but at the same time the next shot we get is something way more hopeful and profound despite all of that, I think.
I don't really think this is, I don't really think it's a depressing movie per se.
No.
But that's, and I don't mean this as an insult, but that's because it's so pretentious. You know what I mean? Like, it just wants to evoke moods. And, some of those moods are, depressing and despair. Like that part where it's early in the movie and it's when it's at the printing office, where that woman just fucking goes on at her.
That was crazy. Just tears her a new asshole.
For no real reason either.
No, she's just like, I've hated you, always hated you. You reminded me of this bitch that I knew.
It's your fault your husband left you and your children are miserable because you're their mother. That's what she says.
Oh man.
But it's
top 10 movie roasts of all time.
Well, to add a bit more into the context, like I said, this film is almost autobiographical to a point where actually Tarkovsky grew up in that same village. I forget the exact name of it. Grew up in the exact village that they were depicting in the film.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Tarkovsky's father also left the family in 1937 and came back in the middle of the war in 1943. But there was something in there that couldn't really be reconciled. So I think, in a way, Tarkovsky is here really trying to explain what the fuck is actually going on with him.
Yeah.
And it feels like a self-portrait almost of the film. And I think there's a point to be made where, in the fact that he's using the same actors to portray the same people, or to portray different people, in that he feels that everything is repeating itself and that it's a cycle that cannot be escaped.
Yeah. We get that too with, I forget if it's Ignat's father or, whoever's father.
Ignat's father was Alexei, who was the little child in the dacha sequence.
Okay. Well, someone says, I was a man raised by women.
That's Alexei.
Okay, Alexei. And my son's going to be just like me now. And the person that you hate, he's talking to his wife. The person that you hate, which is me, is how my son's going to turn out because you're raising him and not me. But it's like, he's such a dick. My God.
He is a dick about it.
I was going to say, too, I guess looking at the film in the filmatic landscape of film history, whatever, it's always interesting, too, because I know he borrowed a lot from Ingmar Bergman, and that was a huge inspiration on him.
Not necessarily borrowed. I wouldn't say borrowed. I think it was more of like a mutual respect. They definitely had a mutual respect for each other's work. Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that. I don't know why I brought that up, but I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Another thing I randomly thought of, there's a poster for Andrei Rublev in the film, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
So like, is that implying that? Okay, is Tarkovsky himself a character in the movie?
I think essentially what Tarkovsky is trying to do in this film is trying to portray himself and the history of his life within those characters that are also representative of other people in his life. So the characters that are playing his father, Alexei, and his son Ignat, those are all supposed to be essentially is the word it's metaphors. They're essentially supposed to be read as Tarkovsky himself.
Okay.
As well as literally they're supposed to be the father, the son, and the grandson.
Yeah, because I think there's I think his wife stars in the movie, and I think also maybe his mother or grandmother.
I don't know about the grandmother, but I know I know that his wife is what was her name?
Larissa Tarkovsky.
Tarkovskaya, yeah. Larissa Tarkovskaya. Yeah, so she was actually a frequent collaborator of his in terms of his work, and she would always help him as well behind the scenes. It might have had to do with that whole thing again, that he wanted to get the people that actually had an influence on his life involved with what he wanted to do. So
yeah, I'm like, you say that this movie is a very personal movie to Tarkovsky, but I'm like, if all of his other movies are more abstract.
Not necessarily that they're abstract, but they're just as thematically difficult. This is definitely like his most abstract film.
Okay.
And which is weird because it's your first watch from Tarkovsky, and I would not recommend this to anybody who's going into Tarkovsky for the first time.
What movie would you recommend for that?
Probably Solaris. Solaris is his most accessible film.
You would like Solaris, I think.
I know about it.
It's essentially Tarkovsky's response to 2001.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which he felt was like cold and stark, and devoid of humanity. I think is the way that he phrased it. But it's funny because Tarkovsky said that of 2001, but then Kubrick saw Solaris and he's like, I actually like your film, man.
Well, I mean, when you have a bunch of images, you got to really put that humanity in there.
Yeah.
And he does it with this movie, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have my problems with Kubrick, and especially 2001. I cannot watch that movie unless I play the commentary track from the actors.
Really?
Yeah. I love Kubrick's early stuff. I love Past of Glory.
Mm-hmm. Past of Glory is great, yeah.
Yeah, and The Killing.
Oh, I love The Killing.
Yeah. So, I like that stuff. But that's him, making a Hollywood movie in the Hollywood way. Dr. Strangelove, that's great too. Mm-hmm. But, then when you get into like 2001 and The Shining and even Eyes Wide Shut, you realize that he doesn't explain the movie, and he does not give a fuck if you understand the movie, because he's such a visual storyteller. He shows everything as if you're a character going on that, like you're a fly on the wall watching everything, and nobody's providing you with exposition to explain anything, and he does not give a fuck. So that's why I think
you have a problem with.
Yeah. He can be tough, and that's why I need like more interaction. That might be why Tarkovsky thinks it's so devoid of humanity, is because it's just so purely visual.
No, I think that's you nailed it exactly. Why Tarkovsky doesn't like Kubrick's films, but I'm curious as to ask now, what do you think of Barry Lyndon?
I have not watched Barry Lyndon. Okay. I bought it because I've heard that it's really great for the cinematography, but I have not. I've not developed the will to watch it yet.
I'll say this. People often say 2001 is Kubrick's best film, but I like, something in my gut is telling me that Barry Lyndon is his best film.
Well, I know I know cinematographers love it, and that's probably why, because different directors film through different ways. Some direct through their scripts. and some direct, through their cinematography and so forth. And Stanley Kubrick, he's definitely one who does it through cinematography. Mm-hmm. So,
but that's what's curious, is that both Tarkovsky and Kubrick are some of those are two of the filmmakers that I think most pushed that idea of visual storytelling out onto the scene. Sven Nykvist, like I mentioned, who did the cinematography on Tarkovsky's last film, actually hated Tarkovsky because Tarkovsky wouldn't let Sven Nykvist operate the camera. Tarkovsky actually, pretend this is the eye hole of the camera. Tarkovsky's like this constantly when they're shooting, and Sven Nykvist is just standing in the background. He's like, why the fuck won't you let me do my job? And Tarkovsky's like this, he's like shouting at the actors, yes, do that, yes, go, you're good. And he's got his eye constantly on the camera. But that's because Tarkovsky, like Kubrick as well, was a photographer before he was a filmmaker. So that visual aesthetic that informed his work, I mean, you can see it throughout.
I just want to thank you so much for justifying my opinion on Stanley Kubrick.
But that's the thing. I love Kubrick for the exact reason you don't like him.
I mean, it's very important. Like we keep saying, visual storytelling is very important for filmmakers to know and do. But it's also not everything.
I mean, there's like, I'll say that like not all Kubrick is made equally, but there are I think of 2001, and I think of Barry Lyndon as like essentially at the very peak of what cinema is capable of.
Visually speaking, yes, I would agree with you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, we just both turned to Danny over. Come on, you fuck shit.
Nice. Yeah, I like them both, guys. I like all of it. It's cool. Really fun.
Have you seen 2001?
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you seen Barry Lyndon?
No. I need to watch it. I feel like
I have it on the Criterion Blu-ray.
I would love to watch it.
Okay. Yeah.
I have it on Amazon Prime. So.
Okay.
I just haven't watched it. Yeah. What's that?
Criterion Blu-ray's better.
I'm pretty sure it's probably the Criterion edition of it. I just bought on Amazon.
Perhaps, yeah.
But it seemed to me like Barry Lyndon is very personal film. Listen, like a character. It's very much about the character of Barry Lyndon.
Yes. And that's why I think that you should check it out, because it feels a lot more human than the rest of his films. It's essentially a biopic, but obviously of a fictional character.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think was a good... Yeah.
Well, I mean, Paths of Glory, there's so much humanity in that movie.
So much so that it got banned in France.
Yeah.
The French were like, there is too much bullshit in this film. We cannot show it in our cinemas.
And by bullshit, they mean the truth.
Where are the titties that Jean-Luc Godard he had given us in the last film?
Yeah.
I'm gonna get banned from ever entering France again.
Yeah. So be it.
It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Well, if there's nothing else, no other things that you guys want to talk about, I want to talk about like little things.
I have way more to talk about, but go ahead.
Okay. No. You go ahead.
No, I feel like I have way more to talk about, but I don't know where to start. So you go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to start with the opening shot of the movie is a boy turning on a TV, and then it moves to Yuri, who is a stutterer from a technical college. And then he gets hypnotized into not being a stutterer anymore. And then you should see the shadow of the boom mic.
Yeah. That's entirely purposeful, though, I think.
You think so?
Yes, because that's an actual recording. Like that, I don't think that he was trying to hide that.
Oh,
that's what it was a recording of the experiment, and that's why he was able to turn the TV on and watch that.
And that's why she said, look straight ahead, right? Yes. And then he looked into the camera.
Yeah. So there's that. Let's see. When the doctor comes by and he asks, "Do plants feel?"
What did he say?
Do plants feel? Like he fall. Yeah, he fall.
When they fall off the fence.
Yeah, and he's like, I see all these things down there, and he just goes on and like, do plants feel?
Do plants have emotions? Do they have thoughts and memories?
Okay, so we got to the part where he's making fun of the movie now.
Yeah.
That jackass.
And he talks about do plants and trees, do they think and feel things? Do they hear our banalities? And I'm like, motherfucker, how? What is more? But there's nothing more banal than being a plant. I mean, you just stand there, you just stay there, and you can't fucking move, even if you can feel and think and everything. And you think humanity is banal? I mean, come on.
I think your commentary coming from that is coming from a more modern perspective on like how we've had a massive development in ecological movements and how we're trying to give autonomy to plants and whatnot. But I think Tarkovsky is essentially trying to ask the questions about plant autonomy and natural autonomy, much more than that, before they entered the mainstream. Okay. So I understand where you're coming from. It's a bit clunky.
No. I just want plants plants moving. I mean, we feel and we can move, but we're banal. We're the banal ones. Plants aren't banal. That's what you're telling me.
Okay, I think it's a sort of spiritualism.
I understand the spiritualism that we need to, be one with the universe and shit. But you're telling me that humanity is more banal? Yeah. You're telling me humanity is more banal than being a tree?
No. What he's saying is
being a tree in the same place for
humanity is banal compared to the divine. That's what he's talking about. And in the plants, he's talking about the divine. When there's that great wind, when the doctor's walking away, it's all the plants moving around.
That's what I was thinking about this whole movie is like, man, how great the wind machines they had were.
I was thinking about that too. I was like, "Holy shit! What kind of fan do they have? Did they just get a helicopter to drive by?"
I think that it was just an incredibly windy day. I don't think they could.
No.
But you see the direction the wind is coming from. There's no fucking machines
maybe in
anywhere.
certain shots, but there's some.
Maybe in the shot with the doctor as he's walking away in the field, that might have been an accident. But like but for that slow-mo shot where they pan
with the boy running.
Well, that one was definitely a wind machine. Yeah, but there's also the one where it pans over to a little table.
The everything's falling over.
Yeah, and that was definitely a wind machine.
Or strings.
No.
But they had to use wind to move the grass and the trees and stuff.
They live on a plane.
Huh?
They live on a plane.
Well,
it could be windy as shit there for all I know. I don't. But we're getting into stuff that I don't fucking know about.
Do you know how long of a day, a production day that would have been to just set everything up
and wait for the wind?
And just fucking wait for the wind?
It could be a very windy plane. I don't know.
No, it could be. It could be. But I also think there are shots that looked pretty much like a wind machine because there was wind. I'm thinking of whenever Ignat is or some
there's a little kid who's running up to that house, and then there are the trees, and then there's the big gust of wind,
and the clotheslines are blowing. Oh my gosh, the clotheslines are blowing towards him. But past the house in the background, the plants and the trees, they're not affected by any wind. I mean, it could be just a gust of wind, but it doesn't really matter. But like, it is.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool is in that same shot, after the wind gusts, that's when all the acorns drop.
Oh yeah.
And I was thinking about all the grips, boxes full of acorns just tossing from all camera. This is what I think about when I watch movies. I think about how did they do that? What happens out of frame.
I think we all think about that because of the backgrounds that we have. But
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have wondered about that one shot of Solentin, the guy who plays the doctor, of him walking away from the dacha and the wind suddenly blows over, because that's a beautiful shot.
Yeah, that's a wonderful shot.
And if it wasn't, that's the thing. If it wasn't wind, natural wind, I have no idea how they got that.
Yeah.
That one I was not convinced of either way. But it could be too. Again, it could be they just waited for the right moment. Because some of my favorite examples of filmmaking, like there's a movie, one of my favorite movies, I think, Burning. There's like a flock of birds.
The Korean one, right?
Yeah. And that was, I thought, I was like, when I was watching, I was like, that's got to be CGI. Like, that would be really easy to CGI, but like, it's not. Like, I listened to an interview from one of the filmmakers, and it's totally not. And also, I'm thinking of whenever people just wait for the rain, like in Gummo. I haven't seen Gummo, but I know they just waited for like the entire month to try and get the rain to come, and it finally came, and they shot this scene. Anyways,
right.
But the plants.
Yeah,
the plants. That is the spiritualism of the film.
Okay.
It's about the divine. It's about the non-human that feels greater. The unconscious. The collective energy. I think.
So you're telling me plants feel.
They do.
Okay.
But it's not about that. It's
I
the
understand.
question of.
I understand.
All right.
I don't have a problem with talking about the oneness of all.
But it reminds me too. Okay, I wrote this down. There's a part where the like a spoon falls off the table. It's like exactly shot for shot almost of in Stalker. Whenever like the stuff starts falling off the table, like. To me, that's got to be right. That's got to be like spiritual, right? That's about the divine or something other than. I mean, in Stalker, it's a little more sci-fi, but
right. Again, I think we need to think about it in terms of what I said, the obscurantism. That we can't exactly pinpoint what this means, and we're not supposed to. Whatever Tarkovsky meant by it, he kept it to his grave.
Yeah,
and it's supposed to mean something to you personally. Whatever it means to you personally, it means to you. Whatever it means to me is going to mean to me. And the more we dig, the less we're going to find out.
When you talk about that, what that really reminds me of is Philip K. Dick, and how he talks about how what we know as reality is illusion or can be illusion, and how much does but the illusion can still matter.
Yeah. Well, I was just so the other night I was up late and
texting me at 1:30 a.m.
Well, that was last night, right?
I don't know. You did it like 2 nights in a row.
Yeah, it's been a weird sleep schedule lately.
Well, after midnight is the best time to read Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, I was listening to a Philip K. Dick interview. Probably one of my favorite interviews of all time. I love listening to interviews, and he just goes on, and it's so cool. But he talks about it, like his obsession with human perception and the personal reality versus the real reality, the outer reality, and how they overlap sometimes, and just all this stuff. It's so cool. But yeah, I could see that in this film too. It's just thinking about the film being, imagining this film being in Tarkovsky's mind. You know what I'm saying? Like just this, he's trying to put out what is in his mind into film, and it just being an exploration of memory.
That's why it's so fucking weird, because it's so personal to him. And no matter his attempts to make it universally understood, it's always going to be best understood by him and him only.
And I think that's why there's a similarity maybe between him and David Lynch too, because Lynch talks about his films the same way. He's like, you want to explain the film? Watch the film. That's what the explanation is.
I think a lot of about what Alice said about David Lynch, about how David Lynch is to kind of more film buff audiences what Michael Bay is to general audiences, where it's just like
it's a gateway.
Not necessarily a gateway.
Okay.
What was the word that Alice used? Something like David Lynch uses his weirdness as a way of doing phenomenon, whereas Michael Bay uses explosions and action as a way of doing phenomenon, but for mainstream audiences. Does that? I think something like that Alice mentioned to me. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. Talking about phenomenon and the weirdness. It's a spectacle.
That's the word. Yes, spectacle. Thank you. David Lynch uses weirdness as a spectacle the same way Michael Bay uses action as a spectacle.
That's very fair. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I also think it's an exploration of his own mind too, in a lot of ways, as
Fair
is
enough.
all film. But I agree with you, and as far as like David Lynch being used as like an example when he's maybe not the perfect example, but he's one that a lot of people know, so they use him. Just fair.
Yeah. And y'all were talking about how Tarkovsky uses this movie to get like what's in his mind out there, and for us to experience. that just made me think of oh my god, hold on, Inception. You made me think of Inception by Christopher Nolan. Could you imagine like physically being within this movie if it's the mind and memory of Tarkovsky?
Being within a dream of Tarkovsky would be incredible. Yeah, that would be like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. But in that movie Inception, there's a lot of that dream logic, but that's done way more mainstream than what's on,
For sure. And again, it's using action as a way of intriguing common audiences into thinking a bit more about those highbrow concepts, right. Which is, I've always had an admiration for Nolan for being able to do that. I mean, we fucking just released a 3-hour. You know how I describe Oppenheimer? Have you guys seen Oppenheimer yet?
No, I have. Yeah.
Oppenheimer is a 3-hour podcast. Because that movie, you don't get a break from the dialogue, but it's not in a way that's like, it's not in a way that we were talking about where it's not visually stimulating, because that film uses IMAX as a way of showing the canvas of someone's visual landscape, right? The visual landscape of a person, of a face.
Yeah.
So it remains visually stimulating, but at the same time, anyways, the point I'm trying to get at is Christopher Nolan uses his name and his style of film to get common audiences to think about more abstract objects, about more abstract ideas, which is something I've always admired about Chris Nolan.
Well, we kind of talk shit about Christopher Nolan in the Big Jake episode. So,
what about Interstellar?
Yeah. Yeah. If you listen to that, you'll find out why I fucking hate Interstellar.
When is that one coming out?
Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Yeah, November. So
Big Jake, who was that with?
That's a John Wayne movie.
Okay.
With his son Patrick Wayne and his son Ethan Wayne playing his grandson Little Jake.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
What was I gonna freaking say? I'm terrible with this. I just want to talk about some quotes that I wrote down because they're freaking beautiful. Keep going.
Yeah. I have more. There's a lot of nice dolly ins and dolly out shots in this movie.
Yeah.
That are neat.
It's his best friend in terms of doing those long shots and in terms of that whole idea of manipulating time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that. And there's this let's see. Yeah, and I wrote down, I'm starting to get antsy.
No, you're fine.
That was about an hour in, so
you're good. You're editing this out.
And that was during the whole military training part.
Oh, that was so cool, though.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't antsy. Let's see.
The freaking heartbeat through his brain.
Yeah,
that was so cool.
Yeah.
There's just so many beautiful.
I think I remember
details.
him repeating that same effect in Stalker.
What? When?
It's been a while since I've seen Stalker. I couldn't tell you, but I feel like I remember that somewhere. Or it might have just been a close up of the guy's head.
Yeah, I think it was a close up of the guy's head, and maybe the head, like the way the head, moves and. The blood flows through the head, maybe.
Fair enough. I'm not exactly sure how they got it though, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
And that scene was so incredible. I think, again, I'm going to talk about just the.
Okay, go for it.
I just think this movie is the memories that make up of the core. I think this movie is just his core memories. You know what I'm saying? That's what I feel like this movie is. Anyways, go ahead. Keep going, Steven.
There's a Sadako shot.
A what?
Sadako from Ringu, The Ring.
Okay.
When the woman was washing her hair in the barrel, and then she lifted her hair out, but she had her head down, and so her hair was wet, and she's going like this. It's like Sadako from The Ring.
Yeah,
I'm not wrong.
You're not wrong.
That's where The Ring got it from.
Yeah, well, Ringu. Yeah.
Ringu.
Are you into horror movies?
I like good movies. I say that because a lot of horror movies are shit, and I'm not into horror movies as a genre. But if there's a good horror movie, I will enjoy it.
Okay.
You look so offended.
I look very offended.
I understood what he meant.
A bad movie?
No, I'm just saying. I understood what he meant. You completely misunderstood what he meant, I think.
No, I got what he was saying. You should come for the Halloween episode because we're gonna watch my favorite.
When is that?
It'll be in October.
Okay. Because I'm not going to be here for Halloween. That's why.
Oh.
Yeah. We record early or late.
I leave on the 20th of October. I'll be gone till
we might record early. We might try to if we record early. Okay.
I'll be here between the 11th and the 20th.
You should watch Ringu, and you should watch when.
I've seen the Naomi Harris one.
I mean, the only better thing about it is the videotape, and that's it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is the same story, but it's done with like a lower production.
I understand that. That always adds
so
quality.
Yeah. So it's a little grittier, and so that adds to the immersion.
It's a little more spiritual too.
There was this one. Japan always has a very interesting culture of horror.
Yeah.
To it, because it usually always has something to do with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But one film that I really enjoyed up to like the last 30 minutes, they got kind of like wonky. But it was another Kurosawa. It wasn't Akira. It was another filmmaker named Kurosawa who did the film where it's about the people who start disappearing.
Pulse.
Yes, Pulse.
Okay,
yes,
I haven't seen that one.
Pulse is very interesting, and I think it's on the Criterion channel. At least Criterion has an edition of it.
Okay.
But the film is very good up until the last 30 minutes where it just gets kind of like But yeah.
Well, Japan, I really love Japanese horror. So yeah. So
check that one out.
Yeah, I want to. I have so many other movies to watch.
Of course. Don't we all?
Don't we all?
Sure. So there was a Sadako shot. And also there was another really cool shot near the very end where the woman was hovering over the bed, but her hair is too.
That's one thing that Iñárritu straight up ripped off of Tarkovsky. There's several shots in The Revenant where that exact style is emulated, and where you can see the influence directly.
I was thinking about how many metal wires must be in her hair to keep it straight like that. I think
that dress was big enough that they were able to hide like some sort of like platform that they had on. Yeah, but I'm not sure. I don't think they documented how they got that.
Okay.
I was thinking there's a plank coming out of the wall behind her.
Yeah, the whole Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where the bridge is invisible, but then they pan the camera and then...
okay. And so they painted it.
Perhaps, okay. The whole visual perspective type thing.
Yeah, that could be it too. That was a wonderful shot.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You have more?
No, I'm done.
Okay. I have only like 2 quotes, I guess, to read, but
okay.
There's nothing. She needs nothing from you other than for you to become a child again, so she can hold and protect you. What a freaking hard hitter of a line, just amazing. It reminded me a little bit of, again, Ingmar Bergman in a way that the characters speak so poetically, it's almost like a play sometimes. Like I've seen only a few Bergman films, but I'm thinking of An Autumn Sonata, which is basically a play.
All of Bergman's films are essentially a play.
Yeah. But just lovely, very evocative, and very, again, talking about something that is not physical reality that we all typically experience. I'm obsessed with that idea of the divine and the extraordinary. And then there's just another quote, but it was, my overwhelming joy is overshadowed by the fear of awakening. Just him thinking about the dreams and waking up. Just gorgeous language. And some of the poetry was beautiful. It adds so much more that was his father. Mm-hmm. That's so cool. I was wondering because I saw the name and it looked similar to his, but I'm not sure how the names work. So
yeah, Tarkovsky is obsessed with his father. Tarkovsky's son, who was also Andre, I believe, Andre Jr., ended up doing a documentary film recently released that is essentially about Andre Tarkovsky and the effect that his father's poetry had upon his films. And I've seen like the first 15 minutes. I wasn't able to watch it in full, but it's I won't say where I got it because for reasons. But if you can get your hold on it and check it out, I can look up what it's called real quick.
Okay.
Because it also adds another perspective to what's going on in this film, and it lets you understand it a little bit more personally in terms of where Tarkovsky is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I want to double check my notes, but I think that was about all I had wanted to read. Oh, just the beautiful idea of I forget if it's their father or the mother's father who never came back, and he would always come through the woods behind the house and the bushes would shake, and if the bushes would shake, that was him.
Yeah.
And just setting up that visual metaphor and repeating it throughout the film was brilliant. And I talk a lot about my creative writing professors in this podcast, but one of the things that he talked about, one of my professors, was if you can create a metaphor in your film, it's much more powerful than if you use universal metaphors like fire and food and bread and things like that. If you can create a symbol in your film and use it, it is infinitely more powerful.
Like a symbol unique to your story.
Exactly.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that was beautifully done with the shaking of those specific bushes. And it reminded me in the end too, whenever we recede into the tree line, I was like, is this behind the house? Is this where we're going to come out of one day and return?
I think it's notable that I believe when they talk about that, what we're seeing is this young boy in a bed, and I think there are like bells in the bed. And so as he wakes up and gets up, you hear the bells. So it's like, he hears the rustling of the bushes, but we also hear the bells from that boy moving in the bed. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right after the fire sequence, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
The film that I was talking about is called Andrei Tarkovsky, A Cinema Prayer. If you guys want to check it out, it's like an hour and a half. Fairly easy to watch. And one interesting thing to note, and kind of obvious, I think, for a filmmaker like Tarkovsky, is that there's a quote from Tarkovsky in Cinema Prayer that's something along the likes of, in order to understand the artist, just look into his childhood, because that's the most formative part of his career. Obviously, that's abridged, but
yeah.
Well, that's why I watch Beastmaster. So
nice.
That's what I did during my childhood.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Carlos, any last thoughts on the movie, or
Daniel?
Sorry.
Damn, Daniel. Sorry.
I hate you.
You haven't heard that one in a while.
I actually have heard it more recently than you would expect. Anyways, the freaking, it was a really interesting scene when they go to the farmhouse and they meet the farm lady who makes her cut the head off the chicken. I thought that was really interesting. It's just as a scene, there are a few really standalone scenes that could function as short films that are really fascinating to me, that are not as abstract as the rest of the film. But the power dynamics of that scene were really, really interesting. Sorry for using a non-word.
We've been using it the entire show.
Wait, what's the
non-word is interesting. It's
interesting is not a word. It doesn't mean anything.
It's a non-word.
So when you use interesting, what is interesting about it?
No, I had a similar experience with that last summer. When I was doing my school, my ethnographic filmmaking school in Athens. I learned quickly that in academia, whenever somebody says, "Oh, I find this interesting," it's basically them saying, "What the fuck is this?"
We're quoting it from Captain Fantastic, though, because that's a quote from the movie that we liked, and we are incorporating it into our.
And I pissed Alice off using it in an episode.
You have a very good point in not including that word in the podcast. Yeah. This podcast is interesting.
Fuck you.
No, fuck you.
Anyways, yeah, that was cool.
Okay,
I liked it.
What was really cool about that about that scene was after the woman cuts that head off, and then it's that close up of her face, and there's just Phil like right at her face, making all those shadows, and then it's a match cut to the guy going to the black and white scene with her hovering over the bed. So match cut there. Just want to say,
beautiful.
Yeah. Are those your last thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'll always have more, but I think it's time.
Well, we can do that. We can save it for the next year in review.
Yeah, a year from now. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Carlos, any last thoughts?
Спасибо большое, да слушаете нашего подкаст. Это Карлос, Даниэл и Стивен. Мы хотим мир в... I need to. My Russian is so rusty.
Well, your Russian is better than mine. So.
Yeah, no, my Russian is very rusty now. Actually, sure, I'll end on this note. Andrei Tarkovsky is the reason why I wanted to learn Russian.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, because I wanted to understand the poetry that he is using in this film, and be able to eventually to watch his films without subtitles.
Yeah, he definitely is a visual poet. For sure.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what his book is called, actually.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Like his posthumous biography is called like a visual poet.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah.
So Dan, would you watch this movie again?
Yeah. I want to watch it after I watch a few of his other films and return to it. I think that would be fun.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Would you watch it again, Stephen?
I would watch this movie again at a party.
This is not a party movie.
But if you're at a party that has this movie on, you're not at a good party. So.
Also, what did you say in Russian? Did you say this is a piece of shit podcast?
No, I said.
And stuff?
What did I say? I totally forgot. If I listen back to it, I can give it to you. But something essentially along the lines of. My name is Carlos with Daniel and Steven. Thank you for listening to our podcast, and we hope for peace.
Okay, nice. Well, do you want to plug your stuff now?
That's what I was going to do next. So, Carlos, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently working on finishing my MA thesis, which is a film that I'm titling Naldi's Workshop. In Spanish, the preferred title is El Taller de Naldi. It's a semi-auto ethnographic film, which I have just finished filming over this past summer with my grandfather, who, after retiring, began painting as a hobby, and he enjoys painting a lot of rural scenes from his youth growing up in Puerto Rico. So that's my next project that's gonna come out sooner or later, and it should be finished by the end of September, and then where it's gonna be released, hopefully some festivals. But that remains to be seen. We'll see, inshallah.
But you also have...
do you have any social media that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm CD Leo Rivera F. YouTube, Carlos Rivera Fernandez. I'm not on Pornhub yet. I'll get to that soon. On Shitter, I'm CD Leo Rivera as well.
Okay, wonderful.
But Shitter is Elon Musk's little.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing he sequestered from the world and is now labeling X.
Yeah.
Shitter instead of the
Twitter. Gotcha. Yeah, nice.
with
Well, I'm just
I
on
cracked
Reddit.
myself up. So,
But you also have some. Do you have any films that are available to watch? I mean, they're on your YouTube, probably, right?
they are on YouTube, but they're private because they're still in the festival circuit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Also, you have some ideas for films that if anyone listening to this wants to fund some movies.
Well, do you want to plug those films when they?
Huh?
The movies that you made that are on the festival circuit. Can you?
Sure. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about those. So, 2021, Daniel and I
That's me.
were able to work on a film called The Only Good Thing, which is more of a proof of concept of a film that I've been working on since the 12th grade, for the last 5 years now, called Wish You Were Here. And it is a story about how... I still struggle to define what this is without spoiling it.
You don't have to talk about it. Just talk about the film that you already released. It's cool.
Sure, yeah.
Or just just a title and.
Yeah. The Only Good Thing. Check it out in a film festival near you, or on YouTube once the film festival circuit is done through with. I've also got my film that I made in Athens along with Philippos Manioros and Vasilis Sonoglou, which is an exploration of an Athenian musician's nearly bohemian lifestyle. And then I also have another film that I made last year called Víspera de Magia, Las Fallas de San Jose, which is a portrait piece on the Valencian festival of Fallas. And all three of those are out and about in festivals right now.
Okay, wonderful.
Freaking great.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Fantastisch. Das ist sehr gut.
Yeah.
Before we go, we'd like to give a shout out to the bestest friends of the show on our Patreon. Thank you, Brian, for your support of the show. If you'd like to be one of our bestest friends of the show, then check out our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/yourmoviemymoviepodcast. And thanks for listening.
Cool. You gonna do a little Irish jig for us now, Daniel?
Yep. But you're not going to see my feet.
Okay.
Are we done?
Yeah, we're done. I'm glad you could be on the podcast, Carlos.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
I've been wanting to have you on it ever since we started the podcast. So.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for dealing with my pretentious film.
Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about too. Sorry.
Okay.
There's a quote that was like, I think it was from Francis Ford Coppola. It was like, pretentiousness is if you're trying for something great and you fail. So I don't think this movie failed. I think this movie is not pretentious. I think Big Gold Brick is pretentious because it tried for something potentially great and it completely failed.
We don't have time to unpack all that. So.
Okay. Anyways.
Sorry.
This, I just want to go on the record. I didn't mind this movie. I don't think it's a bad movie.
Yeah.
I think it's a great movie. I just don't think it's my cup of tea, really.
Perfect. Yeah, of course.
Well, here's a question: would you watch any of my movies? Any of my picks?
Depends on which one it is.
Okay.
Depends on what it is.
Okay.
We'll have to have you on again for Stephen's pick.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. I guess we're done.
All right, thanks.
All right, bye.
No fuimo. Do свидания.
Yeah.
Увидимся.
Y'all come back now here.
Bye.
Спасибо большое.